Start. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Stevens. I'm a third-year medical student at Ross University School of Medicine. Thank you guys for joining us tonight for our tips on interviewing for the upcoming match season tonight. I have with me my co-host, Shantae Williams.
Hello, everyone.
And then Zoe Cole. And then we have our lovely panelists joining us, our alumni. We have Dr. Eric Sims, Dr. Devon Budin, and Dr. Lola. Yeah,
Samuel.
I didn't want to butcher it.
All good.
Awesome. So we're going to run the session tonight. We're just going to go through some questions. If anyone has any questions, at any time, please drop them in the chat and we will ask our panelists those accordingly. And then at the end, we'll have some time to just, if you guys want to unmute yourself, you can do that as well. So Shantae, would you like to ask the first question?
Sure. All right. So welcome, guys. I know you guys are busy in residency, and thank you so much for taking this time. Our first question is, what is your best advice for preparing for interviews? How do you answer the question, tell me about yourself?
I can go. We all unmuted.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I could just go real quick. Like for me, I had, I guess, like a structure for how I answered it every single time, and I just like stuck to the same thing every time. So I kind of started with just like a background of like myself, like where I'm from and like where I went to school, and then kind of went into like my like emergency medicine interests and kind of finished with like things that I do outside of medicine. And that's just like what I did every single time.
I could go next. So similar to Lola, I kind of stuck to the same thing. And I feel like every interview you'll have, they'll probably ask you this question. I feel like for me, it was usually the first answer. The theme of my personal statement and the reason why I went into emergency medicine is to work with like underserved communities and work with communities that were similar to like where I grew up. So that was kind of like just my theme. So I stuck with, my family's from Belize. They immigrated here in the 80s. I grew up in Inglewood, California, that looked like this, which was my spark into emergency medicine. And I've done these things to prepare to be in medicine. And I see myself doing X, Y, and Z in the future. And then I also added I also like to do outdoor things like hike and go biking and eat good food. Just like in general tip that I did, I recorded myself when I was getting ready to like answer the questions. I just wanted to like hear, how I sound. And then also I do a thing, like I like to do this when I talk, and I didn't realize it until I recorded myself. And I'm like, that doesn't look too professional, it makes me look nervous. So that kind of helped me just like recognize my mannerisms.
I can only add to that. That's really great answers. I want to answer this kind of backwards because I had an experience yesterday that I thought was interesting. My APD was on shift with me, and I have a pretty small program. There's only 6 per class, and everyone's pretty tight. But he asked me like some questions of like things he already knew about me because we're both like from the same area out west, and it just kind of sparked my like memory that like even though like we all know each other really well, they don't remember every little thing about us. And part of those questions they ask you in the interview is kind of to remind them of who they're interviewing. So like when you give that synopsis, it kind of like sparks them, okay, this is the application that I read. So if you can give like a quick synopsis in that answer, it helps like, okay, this was this person that went to this school and they did this, like whatever your random special thing is. And this is the guy that likes to rock climb or sing or like whatever the thing is. So if you can kind of like highlight those things, it helps them remember exactly which applicant you are. They probably reviewed all the applications right before the interview, but then they also have like however many that they're doing that day. So they're still going to be like, wait, which person is this? Especially if it's over Zoom, it's really difficult. So being able to just like highlight yourself very quickly, it's a good like reminder for them.
Awesome. How did you guys go about answering or what was the hardest question that you guys were asked during your interviews?
I had one really random one. For the most part, my interviews were 3 flavors. One was like just the generalized, like standardized questions that they tell you were taken from a list. The other flavor was, I just want to get to know you. And then I had a very random question where the person talked for 5 minutes and they said basically, what would you do if you were trying to rob a bank and then you got shot and then you got into a car accident? And they literally talked for 5 minutes. And I didn't know what the point of that was, but I was just like, are you trying to make sure that I'm not going to freak out during this situation? Like what type of social experiment it is? So I kind of just like made a little joke and I said, well, any situation where I get shot is not a good day or something like that. But it was just such a random question and I ranked that program very low. So I think with the very, very random questions, just try not to get too flustered, um, make light of it. And that's how I preached it.
There's a couple times I was asked like, what's your biggest weakness, or something like, tell me a time that you failed during rotations and how did you handle that, or if like you had like a bad outcome. And it's always like a tricky question to answer. So I think if you have something prepared for that so that you don't like clam up, and don't be like, my biggest weakness is I'm a perfectionist. Like they hate that kind of stuff, but just, they just want to talk to you and like get to know you and like see how you think. So especially in EM, like the pressure is not quite so like, like medicine heavy. Like, how would you handle if a person was dissecting and they also had a gunshot wound? Like, like they just want to get to know you.
Yeah, I had the same one. I like Eric said, it's very tricky because you don't want to say anything that's too bad where they don't want to like hire you, but you also don't want to give a BS answer either. So it's like a fine line. So you have to think about that really hard.
Okay, thanks, guys. So our next question is, what is the setup like, being that now the interviews are more so virtual? Does the background really matter? And if so, what are the things to avoid having on camera?
I can go. So like I have a history in music. I was a musician before. And so like I had like my guitar hanging on the wall, and it was like a good like talking point, especially because sometimes like you'll be with residents and like they're not really interviewing you. They're more like, do you have any questions? And then like you've kind of run out of questions at that point. And so then they'll just like talk to you about stuff. But that's actually to your benefit, because a lot of the interview process is just to see like if the other residents will vibe with you and if you're like a weirdo or something. So like that's a great chance to have like something in the background that's like a talking piece.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I was the ultra conservative one when I was going through my interviews, and I was like, I'm just gonna have a white background, like I'm not doing anything off the wall. But now that I'm on the other side and we're interviewing, and we're like interviewing in between shifts sometimes, and like Eric said, we're really just there to like have a conversation and see like, are you going to be a good fit for our program? Can you, in general, hold a conversation? So if you have something in the background that can spark a conversation, I think that's good.
Okay, thank you guys. How many mock interviews do you think someone should do before they have their actual first interview?
I did a lot of mock interviews. I mean, we were the COVID class, so we were all trying to figure it out together. But I just did a ton, as much as I could, until I felt like comfortable with all of my responses. And so I just picked like 2 or 3 people, like one of my best friends, like my mom and then one of my mentors, and we would just like go through like questions and my responses. And then I did what Devon did too. I would like record myself responding to questions, so you can kind of see like your posture and just kind of the things that you say. You don't want to like over practice where you feel like it's not natural, but you want to feel comfortable with the responses that you're going to be giving.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a sweet spot how many to do. I think everyone's going to be different. I personally did 3, but I had a list. I think there's a list of like commonly asked questions during interviews floating around somewhere. And I would just practice those sometimes when I'm like driving or when I'm just by myself. Because after 4 years of medical school and then whatever else you did before, we're just not used to talking about ourselves and like what we did. Like we're used to kind of being the bottom of the barrel, just trying to get through rotation. So kind of switching your mindset to talk about yourself and talk about things you did. I felt like I was really out of practice. So for me, it was just trying to practice like how to speak again.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I did about 3 as well. And my one advice with that is to be careful who is joining your mock interview. I had one person from Ross that was on staff there that I don't believe this person ever really did interviews before. And so the questions weren't great. And you could tell there wasn't like a lot of insight about what the process was. So you like just need to be mindful of that, because you could get feedback that could, tank you. And then I also had the chance to do a mock interview with someone who is like a program coordinator, I think for like an ENT program, like a residency program in New York, which is like sounds really cool. But like I was only interviewing for EM, and the questions again were like they were just strange, and like I didn't have good answers for them. And I was honest about certain things, and afterwards the feedback was like, well, you should never say that, or like you really need to know like these research stats, and like you should really be loving research. And I'm like, no, that's not my thing. And like for a lot of people in EM, it's not their thing. And so this person just didn't have insight into like what EM is looking for. So you need to be mindful of those things when you get the feedback if you do a mock interview.
Okay. All right. So this leads us to our next question. We kind of touched on it. Devon, you had a very funny story about your situation in that interview, but we really want to know, how did you prepare for the bizarre questions, such as, if you were like an animal, tell me what would you be? Because we know they're coming and we just don't want to clam up. So can you guys really make sure you help us in that area?
Yeah, thankfully, never really got questions like that, but I literally just Googled. I don't know what I typed into Google, but I just found like weird questions, like weird interview questions, and just practice them. You just have to highlight a good quality about yourself. Like like one of my friends, I think, said, I would like, okay, so she was asked what like appliance would you be in the kitchen and why? And I think that he said like a fridge because he stays cool under pressure. Like you just have to be clever with the responses, and they just will appreciate your creativity. But yeah, just make it a good quality about yourself.
One of the things my program director said the other day that I feel like answers this question really well is she was saying like whenever someone like auditions with us, like she gets to know them and she gets a feel of whether or not they're going to be a good fit. Whenever she gets an application on paper and she's never met them and didn't come across them anywhere else, like it's really hard call to just be like, yeah, this person's going to be great in the program. So like these short little Zoom interviews, it's the time to like see like if you're just going to be like an uncomfortable or annoying person to be around. Because honestly, like once you make the interview, like they know whether or not they think you're going to be hack it, academically, medically. This is just to make sure that you're someone that they can tolerate. So like all of these questions are just like to be conversational. Like I wouldn't put too much pressure on like whether or not you pick the right fruit, or if they ask you something weird, if you pick like you're not going to say something wrong. You just need to like chat. That's like the point of this, is like just to like see who you are and how you are. There's no like right answer for the fruit question or whatever.
Yeah, I already gave my weird one. That was the only weird question I was asked during all of my interviews. But the common ones I looked up, if you would do a drug, what drug would that be and why? So I was not asked that, but I've heard people were asked that. Don't don't tell them that you've done a drug before. It's a hypothetical one. Um, yeah, that's like only the only random one. But I agree with what both of you guys said. Just trying to make it a conversation.
Yeah, thank you guys for that. These are some hard questions. And now after this, I'm going to be Googling bizarre questions for next year.
I also feel like that's rare. Like that's very uncommon. Like I feel like in EM, they just want to get to know you. So I don't even think that's something you're gonna encounter regularly. I don't know, but that wasn't my experience.
So Eric, I know you said that you had a guitar in your background that kind of tried to be like set you apart for having a conversational piece, but are there any other things that you guys did to set yourself apart during the competitive interview season?
As far as just like in general, or
Yeah, in general, I know it's kind of hard, like especially with like interviews being like a lot of them being virtual, to kind of show your personality. But is there anything that you guys did that you think maybe your peers didn't do, or
I mean, if there was a program I was really interested in, I contacted people directly. So I'll be specific, not just random people directly on like Instagram, but there were certain leaders in programs that hosted socials. And they were like, hey, if you have any other questions, like hit me up. So I had conversations like outside of the actual interview with people, just trying to get a feel of the program. If I've never been to the area, just like a 5-10 minute conversation kind of outside. So I feel like I was able to see them in a different light. And they were able to like talk to me one-on-one. As far as like the actual interview day, I really, really tried to be myself, because it's it's not easy all the time. You're on Zoom. Maybe we're all like comfortable with Zoom now, but kind of like doing an interview on Zoom. I was very honest. Like during my interviews, I was like, I'm super excited. I'm also kind of nervous. I've been preparing for this for most of my adult life, and like this is the moment now. And I'm just like super excited. So I just really tried to let my genuine excitement and nervousness come up, showcase on my interview.
One thing that I think can help you stand out is, depending on the interview, some of them can be really large, especially like the Q&A sessions or the meet and greet stuff. And it can turn into like an hour of people just staring at each other, not really asking questions. So like if you get kicked back to like the waiting room area or whatever, and like you're with residents or attending, then they ask, do you have any questions? And like nobody's talking, like be the one person that like has a question, just so like if anything else, like they'll remember you. Because like I was saying earlier, sometimes they get no interaction with you at all, and so like this is the only FaceTime you're getting. So if you're just gonna stare and be quiet, like you're not doing yourself any favors.
I'll also counter that, like, don't feel pressured to ask questions, because there were programs where I already spoke to the residents beforehand, so I had a general idea of what the program was like, or at least all of my questions were answered. Because these Zoom interviews are exhausting, so like take those breaks to like, rest your eyes, get coffee, use the bathroom, whatever. If you generally have a question, ask it, but don't feel pressured to have to ask questions, because you'll get that. Like, does anyone have any questions? You'll get that all the time. Having like 1 or 2 questions prepared is great, but don't feel the pressure to have to ask questions.
I'll just piggyback off of both of you too. Everyone's different. We all have different personalities, which is the great thing about like medicine, emergency medicine. I would say for the extroverts, be aware not to talk too much. And for the introverts, try to just have like your question ready, or like, just be aware, like it's not a bad thing to be an introvert. I think sometimes introverts can be overlooked during the interview process. Lola, we've talked about this like in our program. But just kind of be aware that you have to try just a little bit harder just to, maybe ask a question or be engaged in a conversation.
All right, thanks so much, guys. So in terms of attire, right, because we all get nervous on that day and maybe we may not wear the right thing. And our ERAS photo, we had to dress a certain way. Is it the same thing with interviews? What attire should we avoid for the interview? And is a blazer like a must? Or since it's on Zoom, can we be kind of casual and we're like business cash, like a button up or a t-shirt? Let us know the truth.
It's just funny because I started off wearing like a blazer and like a dress shirt, and then I don't know if it was like the Zoom fatigue. I just like stopped wearing the blazer like towards the end of interview season because I was just like over it. But yeah, I think at least like a dress shirt at minimum, and then a blazer if you like. Like I wouldn't wear a t-shirt or scrubs or anything to an interview because it's still a professional setting.
I think it depends on the program, and that's hard to gauge. But I feel like if you just go business, like, don't go too casual, you can't go wrong with that. So I wore like a nice shirt and like my suit top, like pajamas on the bottom. And then I had a couple of interviews that they said, hey, seriously, guys, you can wear whatever you want to wear. Like you can wear a t-shirt if you want to. And they emphasized that in the invite. And they said, people, we know some people are still going to show up in a suit. And if you want to, like, that's on you. But we're going to be in t-shirts. We may be in scrubs, like come as you are. And for those two interviews, I wore a dress during one, and the other one I wore a t-shirt, like a Lakers t-shirt. And I felt fine.
I know I wore like my suit top and like shirt and tie for every single one. That's just how it worked out. But I did see people like in the Q&A sessions that were like part of interview day, or like even during an interview, or that was like a t-shirt or like a wrinkled polo. Someone wore like a onesie one time. Like I saw a lot of strange things. But again, like the lady said, like be aware of the requirements and like rise to those. And like your room shouldn't be a mess, or like wherever you're at, and like you shouldn't be a mess even if you are comfortable. Like be mindful.
Thank you for that. So now the next question, I know we've been talking about at the end of the interviews, and there's like when they asked, do you have any more questions for me? What were the top 2 or 3 questions that you guys had ready? I know a big one, people have been like, oh, what's your favorite thing about your program? But what other questions did you guys have on hand?
I had 2 main ones for programs that I was particularly interested in. I just asked them a specific question about something on our website or like a specific faculty. So like Rush were really big in like ultrasound training. So I didn't ask this, but if I did, I would have said like, what does your ultrasound training like consist of? Why do residents like it? Things like that. And then the second question that I asked pretty much every program was, what are you guys actively working on to make your program better? Or for staff, especially staff that have been there for a long time, like why do they decide to stay in the program?
I asked if it was with the residents, how receptive the staff was to feedback. I made sure to ask that question when it wasn't with attendings, and I got some pretty broad answers. So I feel like that was a very good question to ask. One question I always had on hand was like with my spreadsheet, because invariably you'll find that they either don't answer something on their website or in a presentation, and there's like some stat that you can ask about, and it's not about like asking a smart question. This question is for you. Like if you want to know like how many shifts per month they work and like what the lengths of those shifts are, like sometimes people like just don't happen to mention that, or like if it's like how many vacation days or like something about pay, like there was always something like that missing from any interview I went to. So like if you have like your list like of your writing stuff down, you can usually come up with a question like that that's actually relevant to you. It's not just for the sake of, asking questions. But my personal one that I always had ready was for the attendings. What do you do if a resident is struggling? Like, how do you handle that, both personally and academically? Because it's really important to know if they're going to leave you high and dry, or if like you're not going to be able to get time off if someone dies, or like whatever it is. Like how they respond to that question and what their answer is told me a lot about the programs.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was asked about like wellness. I think that was like my go-to question. And like I would ask like what do the residents do for fun, like in the city, like outside of work.
All right, thank you guys. So our next question is, how did you tackle the red flag question, such as explaining your failures or maybe any leaves of absences, or if you failed step 1 or step 2 in an interview, how do you rebound from that? What was your answers if you had any of that, and how would you guide someone who does have those things?
I can speak for, so I have a few mentees, and I've reviewed some of their like personal statements as they're getting prepared for interview season. And what I always tell them is like address the problem, address the red flag, but really focus on what you've learned through that experience and what you're actively doing to undo whatever. If it's someone that passed away, or maybe if you failed an exam or something, like you've learned a lot from that. This is what you're doing in order to address those things. And like you didn't give up. And that makes you even more committed to being a physician and pursuing a career in whatever you're doing. So, like one line of what happened, and then like 3 lines of something else.
Yeah, just be honest about whatever the situation is. Don't try to, just be, honest. And like Devon said, highlight the lessons learned and like the steps you took to overcome whatever it was. And then just like emphasize your commitment to like improving, succeeding, and that you really want this. And the thing about EM is like, we really appreciate that. I think that kind of makes you who you are, right? And so just be honest about it.
Thank you guys for that. So how would you guys tackle in responding to an illegal question? That being like, what other programs are you applying to? Are you planning on having children? Those kinds of questions that they're not really supposed to ask you. And if you didn't get asked those questions, how would you suggest to respond to those?
I will say there was a couple times where I was asked questions where like what they're asking. Like some people have gotten smart about the way they ask things. And it really depends on you, like how much you want to say. Again, like if these are legal questions, you don't have to answer them. But sometimes they'll ask you like something about why are you interested in the program, but they'll phrase it differently and they might add a piece. And they're wanting to know like if you have a tie to that area, or if like you have a person somewhere else. And on the flip side, you can say, well, like I do have a tie to this area and that's why I want to come here. So that question can be to your benefit, but like you don't have to answer a legal question, and like you can actually like report that stuff. So I really find like, especially like program directors, they're not going to get themselves in trouble like that. So I wouldn't stress out too much. But if you get broadsided by something, like you can say like, I don't feel comfortable answering that. That's totally okay to say.
The question I was asked the most and I don't know if it's actually an illegal question, but I think just genuine curiosity. I'm from California, but I applied broadly, and I was actually trying to move and go somewhere else. But a lot of people were like, so why would you want to come to Chicago? Why would you want to come to New York? Why would you want to leave California? Especially people that probably never been to California. And I was like, well, I'm just looking for a change. You know, I feel like I can always go back. So just be prepared if it's a geographic huge switch, you know, from 75 degrees to -20, like have a genuine answer of why you're interested in actually leaving.
All right, thanks, guys. So as you know, many of us are applicants this season, and the next season is coming up. We kind of want to know, every program sounds amazing. They sound great. They're going to tell you, we want you, but how did you know that that program was the one for you, through a virtual interview?
For me, it was just like a gut instinct. I don't know. That's really what it came down to. There are programs where I was like, absolutely not. I do not want to train here. And there are a couple programs where I was like, I kind of like all of them equally, for different reasons. And so my rank list literally changed until like the night before, because I didn't know how to rank my top few. And I was like, I'm a religious person, so I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna end up where I'm supposed to be, so it is what it is. But yeah, I just went with the gut feeling.
We can talk about ranking a minute if that's a different question. Just you brought that up, I'm happy to talk about that too, because that's kind of like a complicated thing and it's different for everybody. But for myself, I had like a little note on my phone, and I had like all of my programs in order, and I just moved them around as I did each interview, and I had like little emojis next to each one. If they like just give me like a good like vibe, I was like a little smiley face, or if like it was like no, like hard no, or that there was like a red flag, like I'd put a red flag next to it. It was like very simple. And then if like at the very end I talked to the PD and they're like, we'd love to see you in July, I just like a little handshake there, and like you just kind of have like this whole feeling. I had like a separate list of like all the things I was looking for and needed, but like those were kind of two different types of lists based on just the vibe. But I think the most important thing is like if you were able to audition somewhere, or like if you can go to a second look and like actually meet the people, it's going to make the biggest difference, because that's what made my decision for me for my first choice.
Yeah, for me, for each interview, I just scribbled things on my paper about certain things I liked and didn't like. And I feel like similar to Lola, there are just some programs you're going to be like, nah, like you're at the bottom of the list. I'm not even ranking you. But for my top three, I would say I just had like a really good interview. I had really good interactions with people. There were the programs that they were like, wow, they read my personal statement. They reference things like you really want to get to know who I am. And that was really important for me, because I feel like you're going to get the training. There are certain requirements we all have to have. Like programs are going to be different. But at the end of the day, we work nights, we work weekends, we work holidays, and I want to enjoy the people I work with.
Thank you guys so much. That's actually the last question that we have. If anyone would like to unmute and ask our panelists a question directly, feel free to do so. And if not, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come out tonight and give us some tips on interviewing. We really, really appreciate it.
Guys, please ask questions, turn on your cameras, like it's super informal. Really use this opportunity.
I have a question. So I've been offered 2 verbal interviews at ASAP, and I haven't received formal interview offers. How would you guys go about handling that?
What do you mean by verbal interview?
Oh, like I met them at ASAP and they're like, we'd love to interview you, like taking a picture of my badge, like tell me how to prepare for the interview, but I haven't received like a formal interview offer.
Yeah, so Programs kind of do like interviews in batches. I can't really give you a timeline, but I would follow up just to kind of remind them that you were interested, like who you are and how you met, because you know, sometimes they generally just like may have forgotten. So you could just follow up with an email or whatever to remind them. I would also put a picture of myself in all of my emails, just because I'm sure they spoke to hundreds of people that day. And just like a little quick blurb about myself, just to remind them of who I was. So definitely follow up. When did interviews come out? Like a week ago?
I think both of those programs sent for on Unified, which was the 18th.
Okay.
Last
Yeah,
Wednesday.
yeah, most programs will have like multiple like rounds of interview invites.
I don't know if
Perfect.
it's been in Lola, but like I didn't get that many on the unified date. Like a lot of mine were before or after, so I don't know how much stock that date holds. Also, hi Abby.
Yeah, nothing
Thanks,
else.
guys. I appreciate it.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
So I know you guys talked about like interview fatigue, and a lot of the interviews that I've gotten already when I went to go sign on, like all the dates were full. So some of the programs I'm really interested in happened to be like at the end of January. Is there anything you guys did like mentally prepare to not be so fatigued at the very end of the cycle when like those interviews might be my most important ones?
I can say you'll have a lot of practice between now and then, and like the answers it'll be easy for you. Like it won't be so stressful. The only like advice I can give you to like prevent the fatigue, especially for the ones you're interested in, is to not overschedule yourself. So like too many in one week, or like back to back days, or like God forbid the same day, like I had to do one time, which was terrible. Like those kind of things, just to be mindful so that you're like not drained for that one that you really care about.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And I also think just reminding yourself of why you're doing this, like looking at the holistic picture. I've been doing that now, like applying for jobs out of residency. So I'm like, I'm just so tired. So I actually went back and like read my personal statement, and I was here just like all emotional. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really happening. So I did not do that to prepare for my residency interviews, but just like reminding yourself why you first started medicine, like how far you've come. And a good thing is you get a little break, I think, for the holidays too. So it'll be fresh.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us. My question is, so looking at like, you know, researching programs, looking at the website, like everything seems great. So how did you guys know when you're just like, no, that's a no for me? Like, how did you determine if it was a no for you?
I always spoke to residents. Like there was a program where one resident just straight up told me, "Don't come here," and I was like, "Say less." Like, so I always speak to residents, and I just ask them, just give me like your honest, like unfiltered, like opinion about your program. Also, you could kind of tell which residents are like excited to be on these calls, or if they look like tired, or if they didn't have like banter on the calls. Like it made me feel like, oh, like do they get along? It's hard to tell on Zoom calls, but there are little things that you can use. But for me, I just spoke to residents directly, and I feel that like that gave me a lot of insight.
Yeah, similarly, mine was a vibe. Like some of my interviews I was on there, and like we were just laughing the whole time, like joking around. And I was like, that's a program that I want to be at. And it's like you just remember that banter. Well, personally, I remember that banter that I've had with certain people. And then like Rush was actually one of those programs. And then like when I actually matched there, it was reflective of that. I just didn't want to go to like medicine. Emergency medicine is, you know, it's tough. It's a tough job. And I just didn't want to be at a program where people were just overly serious about everything, so I wouldn't be able to be myself, and I knew I wouldn't be happy there.
I think that you'll find most of those things more from the interview, like the ladies were saying, rather than the website. Like, of course, there's things that are personal for you, like if it's number of shifts or lengths of shifts or number of weekend days or like which, like elective they offer. Like those are like very personal things. That's not really red flags. That's just like your preferences. But like you'll find like during the interview, like other information. Like there was one program that I really liked, and then I found that like they always wear white coats in the ER and they do a month of like hospital floors, like not ICU, like actual floors. And I was like, no, that's a no for me, dog. So like those kind of things, it's very personal for you.
The other thing also, at least obviously being a Black resident, like how they answered like their diversity questions as well, helped me with my rank list too. Because you could tell like the programs who don't necessarily prioritize diversity or are not interested in diversity and the ones that are.
Patricia, we saw your camera come on. It's okay if you're shy. Please ask your
No,
question.
no, I'm not shy. I was just wanted Lola to finish. Hi. So I have a question about if you have come across like medical students who are applying that are more or less area centered applicants. Like let's say there are applicants that are in the interview season that are like kind of obligated to a particular place. Like if you want to stay in New York, if you, for family obligations, or if you want to be in Chicago for more, personal obligations, is it important to just bring that up off the cuff in the interview? Or is that something like you want to, like, it's better to mention like through another avenue, like through ERAS or, something like that?
I think it's very important to mention it, especially like in this cycle where I've heard they call it like a buyer's market because of how the match rate was last year. If they know that you're really interested and you're not just doing the interview smile and like, yeah, I love your program, but like if you can sell a PD on the fact that you're actually connected to that area, it can only help you. Like if you have a reason to be at that program besides all the reasons why you like it, then it's only going to help you for them to pay attention to you.
Guys, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you guys for all these awesome questions. These are great.
I have one more if it's okay.
Yes, Ashley, go ahead.
How did you
Okay.
guys, like handle doing like letters of interest or letters of intent, like when to send them, how to send them? Like I know interviews just came out, but there's like some programs that I'm signal that I'm interested in. Like how long do I wait before I say like, hey, take a look at me?
I usually like if I knew like they sent out interviews and I didn't get an interview, I would wait like a couple days and just be like, hey, I'm interested, like interview me, please. Not in those words, but like I usually waited a couple days and I actually got some interviews that way too. So don't be like annoying, but be like gently aggressive about it. Especially if you know like they've released more interviews.
Thanks.
I sent out a wave of emails in November last year when my third SLOE finally was uploaded. And I know that's a common thing for IMG students, raw students, SG, whatever, because you struggle like the timeline and COVID and all that. And so like my first two were in, applications were in, and there were certain programs I hadn't heard from yet. And I got quite a few invites just by sending an email, not to the PD, but to the coordinator. The PDs can be really overwhelmed. And if you go through the coordinator, I found that I got a lot better response. And that's actually where I ended up matching, is from one of those invites.
Awesome. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ashley, you had a question?
Yes. So I am ending my third year now. So I'm scheduling electives. I kind of just wanted to like jump on this to like kind of get a head start on things. What other electives besides like emergency medicine do you think that these programs heavily like to see on applications? Like, or if that's not really a thing, then just dismiss it. But just didn't know. Going into fourth year, like what do you advise?
If it's possible, I did a trauma surgery elective. That was great, actually, like a really good rotation. I don't know how common it is to be able to do that, but like that would be really good. Anything EM, obviously anything EM like related.
Yeah, I don't know how much it helped, to be honest. I would just do what you think is going to help you when you are a resident, and expose you to as much stuff as possible. And things that could be like related to EM, I think hold more weight. Like, I don't think like your derm letter holds as much weight as, trauma surgery or like your surgery or even like IM. So, but you just want to make sure you get good letters.
I think the one thing to remember or to take into account is when you apply. So if you're applying at the end of third year, start of fourth year, then everything's going to be in before you do some of those or many of those electives. And so other than it being a talking point or a grade on your final transcript, it's not really going to be included on your application, depending on when you apply. For some people, it all could be on there. So like that's something else to just consider.
Okay, thank you so much.
Does anyone have any other questions? If not, thank you guys so much for coming. It was a great session and we wish you luck in this season. Thank you to our panelists as well.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thanks for having us. Good luck, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Guys.
You can like